Hi, I'm Emily Savage, a marriage and family therapist with the Highland Counseling Center, and I'm here today to share with you a quick exercise to help you stay connected to your spouse. We know during difficult times, it's more important than ever to feel connected and cared for by those we love the most. But we can really have a very competing desire to also protect those we love, especially our partners or spouses. When we want to protect them, part of the way we can do this is by not sharing sometimes the worries we're having or difficult things that may be happening. While this comes from such a loving place, it can really contribute to distance growing during difficult times, to loneliness, and even to misunderstandings. So, this exercise that I'm going to be sharing with you today is what I like to call the 5-minute no strings attached check in. Okay, why no strings attached? Well, number one, this check in has a very clear beginning and end. A lot of times, especially during stress and difficulty, we can end up avoiding conversations because we know that if we start, it will go on and on without any answers or ways out. Not in this conversation. We have a start and we have a stop. Secondly, in this conversation, there's no room for arguing, for problem solving, for scheduling. All those things are great and they have their place, but they don't necessarily help us feel connected or seen by our partner. So there's no room for that in this conversation. And lastly, this conversation has very clearly defined expectations. Again, when we're trying to deal with difficult times, when we're trying to work through things with our partner, we can end up getting caught and feeling like we don't know what our partner wants from us. So in this conversation, you know exactly what you're supposed to do coming in. Okay, so how does it work? Well, as you may have already guessed, the structure is very simple. Basically, one person shares for 5 minutes while the other person listens for 5 minutes, and then you switch. That's all. So, but the sharing and listening may be a little different than what you do normally when you're talking with your spouse. So let's talk about that. If you're the listener in this situation, you're not going to be asking questions to your spouse. You're not going to be trying to figure out issues with them. You're really going to be letting them into your thoughts and your emotions. I like to think of this as really like walking your spouse around inside your internal world. Now, often we may feel like, hey, my spouse knows what's going on, or my spouse, they can pretty much guess what I'm thinking. And you may be right about that. But it's very, very different, even if you may guess correctly about what someone is thinking or feeling, to have them choose to actually tell you. It makes you feel trusted, more connected, and more let in. And sometimes you may guess wrong. Your spouse may not know what you're thinking and feeling. So you want to be maybe sharing important things that are going on, but then specifically talking to them about what have you been thinking about that and what have you been feeling. For some of you, this may come really naturally and may seem very easy. You may be wondering, why are we explaining this? And for others of you, this may seem very foreign and very confusing. So if that's you, then some ways to think about this are to ask yourself, what's pulling me down lately and what's bringing me up? What am I hopeful for about lately and what am I fearful about? What are my joys and what are my sorrows? All these questions can lead us into our thoughts and our feelings, which is what we really want our spouse to be let into. Okay, so that's what you're doing if you're the sharer, but the listener, your role here is very important. Okay, so what are you doing? Well, the most important thing you are not doing is talking. So your role here is really just to listen, but this is incredibly important. You want to be listening with your face and with your eyes, okay? So while your partner's sharing, you want your facial expression to be saying to them, I'm hearing you and I care about what you're saying. I'm hearing you and I care. These are huge things. Now, if your spouse is sharing and they seem upset or something seems sad, you may want to comfort them, you may want to give advice or ask questions, but I'm going to really encourage you not to do that, because though comforting and advice can be lovely, it can also sometimes actually stop us from sharing. So what we want really is just to be creating space for your partner or spouse to share. So we don't need to say anything, but we just need to communicate, I'm listening and I care. A really important way to do this is to make eye contact as much as you can. Now, you don't need to have locked eyes nonstop with your spouse without blinking, but we know that when humans look each other in the eye, it really changes the way that we process things inside, and actually can be a big part of helping us feel less alone and more seen and understood. So, listeners, use your face, use your eyes to help your partner feel heard. So then, okay, we get to the 5 minutes. What happens? How do we end this conversation? Really simple. If you're the listener, look at your spouse, use that eye contact again, and let them know, thank you so much for sharing with me. And if you were the sharer, you look back and say, thank you so much for listening. That's it. Then you switch. Okay, so during this time when so much is uncertain and scary, and maybe you're going through a lot of loss right now, I can understand that you could hear an exercise like this and say, how on earth could this help us right now? Of course, a conversation like this isn't going to suddenly make big problems go away, but so much research has told us that if we feel connected, seen, understood, not alone during difficult times, even during traumatic times, it can change the way those difficulties affect us in huge ways, both physically and emotionally. So if you want to protect yourself, your partner, and your relationship, it is well worth it to try to stay connected every day. Hope this is helpful for you. Thank you so much for listening. Grace and peace be with you.